Hello and welcome to the AIM webinar series. My name is Mike Allen and I serve AIM Inc. as their member engagement manager. AIM is the trusted worldwide industry association for the automatic identification industry. For nearly half a century, AIM has provided unbiased information, educational resources, and standards to providers and users of these technologies. AIM membership provides access to an insider's perspective on trends and opportunities, along with a voice in shaping the growth and future of the industry. AIM member benefits include education, advocacy, and community, as well as a role in creating industry standards through collaboration. AIM is an investment in your future. Before the presentation starts, I would like to direct your attention to your monitor to review a few housekeeping items. First, you will notice you are muted throughout the presentation. Please do not use the raise hand option during this webinar presentation. If you have any questions during the webinar, please click the chat icon on the top right of your screen. After this, you will see a chat dialog box at the bottom right of your screen. Make sure in the Send To box you select AIM Inc., and then in the box below type your question. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can after the presentation. Today's presenters are Bertus Pretorius from TuneYes and Bill Hoffman from the Automotive Industry Action Group. All right, guys, take it away.
Well, thank you for joining us on this presentation. We're going to introduce you to a topic called chains of accountability, and we're hoping that we're going to do a good enough job that you're going to be able to walk out of here understanding what we're attempting to teach you. But life on the planet Earth is mostly ordered and efficient since we have the ability to determine risks before we act, and we can be held accountable for our deeds. What that means is that blame can be placed and recourse can be gotten past. You can take care of what happens. Chaos happens when this process falls apart. Life is really all about chains of actions that grease and glue together, that are greased and glued together by chains of accountability. This is the real world. So what we're going to be telling you today is actually patterned on what makes a real world successful. And as soon as I get over the jitters, this thing will get going really smooth. Next slide, please. This webinar, and there is an associated, back one please, because there's a short piece I need to tell you. This webinar and the associated white paper, which we do have, by the way, guys, and it would be good to get it because there's going to be more information in the white paper than we're going to be able to provide for you today. Points out that the Internet of Things will really only be enabled to its full potential when it establishes effective chains of accountability. We're going to explain that further as we go along. Next slide. When someone has an aha moment, that's a light bulb on the left, he's going to talk to somebody about that. That's that little handshake up the top. Those people are going to come to an agreement on the idea, on the concept, on the go-forward process. That's going to result in further information. They're going to go out, get other people involved. Something's going to happen. Parts are going to be built. We're going to actually create something, and we're going to ship it. But before all of this can happen, or to make this truly effectively happen, we have to have these little handshakes across the top. What do those handshakes mean? Those handshakes indicate a fact of accountability. I've spoken with you, you have heard what I've said, you understand what I say, you agree with it, we move on to the next step. And as you can see, all of this occurs all the way around.
Now, Bill, if we go to the next slide, we now suddenly realize, or what happened in the modern world is that computers actually start to provide the glue, the information, the data we deal with, and that direct exchange between the humans is to a large extent being taken over by computers. And in the process, we lost that trust, or the trust is now embedded in computers exchanging information. And what IoT does is makes that real world we used to deal with, which now became sort of almost distant from us, visible to us through Internet of Things. To be able to achieve that, we actually need to make the real world visible to the digital world so that we can enact with the data and we can enact with the things. Now, the reality is we have to do it because the world has become very big and large with lots and lots of things in it. So we need to automate and use machines to assist us to do things in a proper manner. Next slide. So automated identification devices, barcodes, RFID, identify the real world things to the internet. And that is where the term Internet of Things actually comes from. So the process is that we can identify, locate, authenticate, and engage with these things. And engagement means that we can interrogate and obtain information from the thing. We sense the thing. It's not only that we read a barcode or RFID tag. An example is when a vehicle drives down the road, we would sense it potentially with a radar device that the vehicle is there. Then we would like to see what data is available so that we can verify the identity of that vehicle before we use information from that vehicle. If that information is wrong, we might have a problem. But we need to, at the same time, if the information indicates a problem, we need to actuate some action. Next slide.
Now we're going to, I'm sorry, Curtis.
No, carry on, Bill.
Excuse me.
This is your part.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. If you can't have fun doing it, why are you doing it, right? We're going to provide some concept definitions that are not only effective in the context of this discussion, of this webinar, but in the broader scope of chains of accountability. We're going to provide our definitions for automatic identification and data capture, cyberspace, and IoT.
Well, I need to point out at this point, before we'll carry on with the rest of the concept definitions, is that we who are engaged in the IoT standardization world understand that lots of these definitions have different meanings to different people. So it's important just for this discussion to at least align and harmonize our minds around these definitions. So Bill, take it away.
Absolutely. And this ties in with that previous slide where we showed the little handshakes. We're going to provide basis of the handshakes. Next slide, Mike. Automatic identification and data capture typically refers to the data carrier, barcode RFID tag, which is attached to a thing, something in the real world. That AIDC data carrier represents the thing, its identity, its ownership, its status in cyberspace. An AIDC data carrier is not an IoT device. It's the tag or the barcode. An AIDC data carrier is one of the key enablers of the IoT. Cyberspace refers to the digital world, and it consists of information stores, which are physical things in and of themselves, real-world interface devices, sensors and actuators, information translators, the processors that do something with the data they're given, information relays, routers, hubs, distributed processing, those kinds of things, and information.
The memory stick as well, Bill. That one which came to mind is the memory stick is one of those relays. You can data on the memory stick and move it on to some other place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Information applicators, okay? We'll discuss this further in a bit, but the thing that does something with the information passed to it. Next slide, Mike. And the IoT. As we all know, it stands for the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is a cyberspace infrastructure that provides the interconnection for and information on and of real-world objects. Now, interconnected means that some information about a thing has meaning or value in cyberspace and to other things. And meaning and value we define as meaning that some entity, a legal person, has some form of ownership and therefore accountability.
So let's put it in context. Next slide. If we look carefully at those definitions, this slide depicts effectively all those definitions. At the top, we have the domain authority. Now, what we mean with the domain authority is that entity that owns the thing, the data carrier, and all the devices and objects that is in this new world we're dealing with, where we actually have a digital world between us and the real world. So you would see at the bottom we have big data, where data is changed into information, and at the top we have the domain authorities that is responsible to ensure that we have policies in place where there's accountability and we can do some management. Now, next click. The center grouping we call the IoT actors. Next slide. So IoT actors is a logical grouping of what the devices does or do in that world of the Internet of Things. They are typically physical and logical doers, so we need to just step up slightly in the abstraction that we in the modern world actually can have a single processing platform, that we might have more than one app doing something differently, and that app may belong to a different entity or domain authority. So real-world interface devices are those devices that actually are capable of identifying and interacting with the real-world object and the AIDC device or data carrier on the thing. Information relay devices, as we said previously, pass the information on. They don't change it, but it goes through their hands, and we need to ensure and we need to be able to detect that that relay device actually passed the information on as it was received.
And that's critical, by the way. Yeah, right there, that's critical. The relay device, by our definition, does not change the data, and you can trust that it did not change it.
Yeah, well, at the same time, though, we need to be able to detect if anything changed. So there's the world we deal with is, we always believe in the digital world we can prevent the change, but that's not 100% or complete science. And that detection that something changed is the importance of what we're trying to say in the chain of accountability. It's like fake news. If I get the news, how do I detect whether it's real or fake? And this is what we deal with.
Yep.
And the next one there is then the translation device. So what the translation device does, there's other words for it. It's an aggregator. It gathers information from different sources and then change that information into new information. And again, like in the real world, when we do some research studies, we need to make sure that our sources are proper, or when we provide news to the world, that sources are proper. And once we have that information, we have devices that actually do something with it. Like, for instance, in a manufacturing plant, you gather certain information and you make a decision of what to do with it. If you're actually routing postal packages or parcels, then again, the previous device would tell you where something else goes. The same with baggage control, etc. So there's ample examples in the real world where these actors actually are depicted, and this grouping just helps us to group them in a way that we can deal with more complex structures to ensure that everything keeps on working.
And an IoT actor, by a bit of a definition, is intrinsically part of a single domain of accountability.
It's like somebody working for you, Bill. If somebody works for two bosses, then we always have problems.
Yeah, as many of us know. Now we can talk about chains of accountability. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to make it a bit real.
Yes, yes. Next slide, please, Mike. This is a depiction of a single chain of accountability. Okay.
So I assume that's the smart house there in the middle.
Yeah, that's a smart house there in the middle. At least it's as smart as I could make it. Okay, I'm going to use my mobile phone, and I'm going to call my house and tell them I expect to be home by 7:52 in the evening. The smart house is going to take that information, and it's going to determine that, oh, the temperature in the house is a little hot. I better cool it down for him. As well as his normal process is he likes a big, thick slice of bread at the end of the day, and I'm going to start the bread maker, and I'm going to warm up his butter so it's not a hard brick. And, oh, by the way, I detect that he's walking up to the door, and I unlock it. I turn on the lights as he walks to the refrigerator and grabs his chilled drink and pops open the bread maker and slices off a slice. That, next slide, Mike. All of these activities occurred in one system, one service, one chain of accountability under my control.
And most likely, Mike, you probably in that scenario programmed or put the clicks down of what you want your smart house to do. Now let's look at the more complex example of the same, well, a complex version of the same example. So again, I have my smart house. Click. In this case, I don't say anything. I just get in my very smart car and start driving. The smart car detects that I'm going home, and it informs the smart house that I will be home at 7:52. In parallel, next one. In parallel, my computer at work has actually determined from the way I work that I am a wee bit stressed. I probably hit my keyboard or sort of
shouldn't have taken a hammer to
threw my mouse against the wall or something like that. And it sort of worked out now. Burgers need to be relaxed a bit more. So my computer informed my smart house based on its algorithms that Burgers needs to be relaxed. Click. And the smart house, which will now start the bread maker, takes that information and then orders some spices, relaxing spices to add to my favorite crust of bread.
Yeah, morphine from the pharmacy.
No, we can't promote those things.
Can't do that. Okay.
No, not at all. But there are other relaxing things that is now legal. Next slide. So now what you can see is that we have an independent car, independent computer or building, and two independent services, the drone delivery service and the supplier of the material or the consumables for the bread maker. All of them are in independent domains. Each one of them actually, if they make a mistake, can cause a serious, interesting problem like I don't get relaxing homeopathic spices in my bread, but I actually get morphine or something more sinister in my bread. Who's to blame? And that is what we're talking about. How do we detect who made the mistake when something went wrong? And if we are capable of detecting the mistake, then we actually can create accountability, and that will make people and machines, or that will make sure that the main authorities make the machines to work properly. So let's look at a slightly more complex example.
Now this is a true example of a system that exists today. The Internet of Things connection doesn't quite exist, but this process does exist. This slide is described in much more detail in the white paper, and I strongly encourage everyone to get it. But you have a machine that is built. Parts are used in the building of that. Parts come from various people. So you have to track the people, the manufacturers of those parts, because when they are maintained, a replacement part has to be gotten. Now, the maintainer may not be the same as the owner. So I have different chains of accountability here. I have the person that owns it, I have the person that's maintaining it. I have the person that's maintaining building the part, maybe reconditioning the part. So I have to keep track of all of these variables in a methodology that is going to be efficient, effective, and relatable, that says that if something happens in the positive, it goes smoothly, and if something happens in the negative, I know who, I know what, I know where, I know when, and I can resolve it.
Well, we actually have an example of where something went wrong in a world that looks like this here in Brisbane, in Australia. Last year, unfortunate situation happened where the connector to a health machine in a hospital was replaced with the wrong part. The result was that instead of oxygen, they actually fed the poor patient nitrogen. And this is what we try to prevent. Humans are fallible, machines should not fail, but somewhere something went wrong, and we need to be able to detect and be able to check that what the previous guy did was the right thing, and if that thing is not the right thing he or she did, or what that machine did, that we can point it to the right place and take recourse. Next slide.
Properties of the domains of accountability. Domains of accountability do not overlap. And
yeah, otherwise we have to blame two people, and that doesn't work.
That's like having two bosses. And there should be no gaps. Okay?
No, well, we all should work for a boss.
Right. Now, interestingly enough, cyberspace works like real space. Okay? The information that is provided has to be trusted. There has to be a chain of accountability in that information flow so that you can gain that trust. Next slide.
Before you go there, I just want to point out that though it's not that clear anymore, is that humans invented computers because computers are useful to humans. The observation is that often computers have now a bunch of slaves carrying them around, which we call humans. So we just need to really understand that humans use computers, and that's the importance of this whole message, is that the Internet of Things would not have existed unless we as humans had a use for it. Correct.
Now, the IoT will take on a life of its own, as most of the things we create, but AIDC data carriers are the critical piece because they make the real world visible to the IoT world. Without AIDC data carriers, the IoT, the cyberspace, wouldn't have a clue what it's dealing with. Chains of accountability start with the AIDC data carrier. Now, this calls for specific AIDC data capabilities to bring this all together. The really good news, guys, is that current as well as emerging AIDC standards provide these required capabilities. So it's not like we have to go out and invent stuff that doesn't exist. We have the tools today to make this functional.
Well, and we actually understand that these standards are complex. And that's the function of AIM in this whole big game we play, is that AIM makes these standards accessible to the implementers, the users, and just help everybody to be effective in using and efficient in using standards. Next slide, Mike.
Required AIDC data carrier capabilities, you may ask. What are they? Well, they've got to belong to an accountability domain. They must be a simple identifier. They have to have a provable, unique number. And by the way, this is a great case for on-chip crypto. And they've got to be linked to the thing in a provable manner. Well, they may also carry additional information. They could also be field writable. They may carry sensors, which could store data about itself, the environment, the thing. We can fill in a lot of blanks here. May be in contact with other sensors, networks, or act as a relay. They could store and forward numerous other things. They may carry actuators, and they may be in contact with other actuators, be they networks or be they actual things that move, do, interact. And it can carry instructions.
Well, let's just look at that store and forward one. If we actually have a scenario where a thing will move through a place without connectivity, or where connectivity is not reliable or just simply too expensive, you can put data on the tag, on the AIDC data carrier, that will make life for the next step easier. Now, we do see that in mail. We write, or baggage control, we write on the tag what is the destination. And so, and once it goes through a routing hub, that routing hub can write to it that says it came from me. So that's a simple example of store and forward. If you maintain an aeroplane part somewhere in the sticks, in the outback, like we say here in Australia, whoop whoop is the far outback. There's nothing beyond whoop whoop. If somebody maintains something in whoop whoop and it goes back, then you actually could move information with the thing in the data carrier.
But to make all of this work globally, Bertus, we've got to have chains of accountability.
Yes, because if we move that information, how do I detect that some guy in Whoop Whoop didn't put the wrong information on it?
Absolutely, and we've got to be able to trust that the AIDC carrier, the identity is linked with a thing, and the thing
properly
is still linked with the data carrier.
Yeah, in the world where I come from, if you put the vehicle license plate on another vehicle, then we have sort of a problem for both parties. The vehicle whose plate got disappeared and got to another place. Yes, absolutely. And the authorities now expect a little small car, and down the road comes a serious big double D truck, one of those road trains we see in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Next slide, Mike. Now, we've underlined the word accountable because that's the thrust of this entire situation. Accountable IoT actors and AIDC data carriers. Well, what makes them accountable? Well, they have to have a provable unique number linked to a single domain. They should be tamper evident. They should be visual, whether that's mechanical, electronic, or cryptographic. Now, they can be created using such processes as digital signatures, for an example, X509 PKI. There are other methods out there, but we have to have a provable unique number. Now, to create a chain of accountability, domain authorities shall digitally sign information. They sense, they create, they record, they manipulate, they relay, they touch, they do anything with it. We have to have fingerprints left in here that we can prove and have recourse against.
Mike, Bill, sorry, I just want to point out that this sounds complex, but we use X5 and 9 every day. Your credit card has it on. When you go online banking, it's there. It is truly a de facto standard out there. In fact, I can make a statement that if we remove digital signatures from the internet today, it will just collapse completely in total chaos. It is by far not the most perfect solution, but it is definitely the most effective one at this moment. Right. We hope quantum computers doesn't mess up things very shortly.
And the important part is that following the recommendations we're making ensures that the information and the actions in the IoT can be verified and linked to an accountable party through chains of accountability. and we all know that if you renege in the world of the past and maybe world of the present in some places. If you renege on a responsibility, Guido comes along and has a discussion with you, or things happen to you that shouldn't. And we need the ability to be held accountable for what we do. A declarative statement that can be made, I think, with support, is that the success of the IoT lies within the ability to establish, detect, and verify the chain of accountability. We do that today. Yeah, we do that today when you're in a receiving situation at a plant that uses scanned data carriers, linear, 2D, in some cases RFID. You have a trust that the information you just scanned is from the person you just received the product from. It is the information, and you have programs within the AIDC device gathering the data that's doing some checking. Is this the proper code? Is it code 39, code 128, whatever linear or 2D code that you're using? Is it that code that I'm expecting? Yes, it is. Good. What's the data in it? It should look kind of like this. Does it look kind of like this? Well, yes, it does. Oh, good. Then I'll take it in. If it isn't that code, well, I got to reject. If it isn't that form of data, oh, I've got to reject. So we are currently engaged in chains of accountability. So the process we've been talking with you about in this past time is not new. It's something we're all doing today. We're doing it in our real life. We're doing it in our work life. We may have even installed some systems. Some of us out here may have actually installed systems that do this already. What all we're saying is we're taking it from the realm of, oh yeah, well that's not a big deal, to a big deal thing, saying, but this is a process that has to be accounted for, designed to, and designed for to be successful.
Well, you couldn't have said it better. The world is just becoming more and more complex. We moved from a real human world where we trusted the artisan by eyeball. Now that eyeball is gone, so we just see that it becomes now more complex, where we have a single system that deals with our data, our things, to a place where we have collaborating systems, like with air baggage control, to a system which we can see very closely in the future, where that collaboration would be very loosely coupled. We will use information from domain authorities, from parties, from devices, which the only way to identify it is by means of the AIDC device. And that is the importance of what we try to say here, is that we need to be ready to embrace this very interesting IoT world, which actually starts off with the AIC device that identifies the real world object.
Well said. Next slide, Mike.
All right, guys. Thank you, Bertus and Bill, for that great presentation. It looks like we have received a few questions for our AIM webinar Q&A session. If you do have a question, you still have time to get that in. You can click the chat icon on the top right of your screen. After this, you will see a chat dialog box at the bottom right of your screen. Make sure in the Send To box you select AIM Inc., and then in the box below type your question. So you guys ready for these questions?
Yes.
You bet.
All right. The first question directed toward both of you. In your opinions, how secure is the IoT right now?
Bill, you operate in that world. In the manufacturing world, I operate in the vehicle identification world. So the reality is, it's not really that secure. We can say fairly easily in the IoT world.
No, security security considerations are really nascent. People are learning that they have to be secure, just like people learned that credit card transactions need to be secure. And the general public is now becoming sensitized to the fact that they can be ripped off, and in some cases quite easily. While the IoT is still a bit of a baby, and it's still kind of prone to being abused. This is one of the reasons why we put the seminar together, so that we can say that, folks, be advised. You need to be aware of the fact that everything that you put into the internet can be abused if you don't take precautions. And when you take precautions, you are considerably more secure in your transactions. There are companies that are extremely paranoid about their information, and they take extreme measures to protect that information. But yet, when they look at the IoT, they're so used to using it on their phone and stuff, they think, well, it's, no big deal. It's and they really open the gates to the barbarians, basically.
It's all a case of proper awareness. The tools exist to make it secure. The standards exist.
Yes.
The point is, we need to make sure that we keep it simple. I do see very often that the security folks, and I'm referring to the IT security folks, often overcomplicate matters. And what we try to preach in this whole chain of accountability concept is that let's get back to the roots. Things are not really that complex. And for us to make security work, we need to find that simple solution, the key.
Yeah, I think a really short answer to this would be, it's not really, but it can be. You just need to be aware that you need to be, yes. You have to be security conscious. There you go.
All right, another question that we received, basically when the smart device or the device in general is offline, is it still secure?
That is my key be in the bonnet about life, universe, everything, is yes, we can make an offline device secure. And that is what asymmetric cryptography actually provides us. That's what digital signatures does.
Yeah, but Bertus, the question is, the way I would answer it is, assume generally, yes, it can be hacked if it's offline, but yes, it can be protected so that it can't be if you're offline.
Well, Bill, we used to say, I come from the world of IT security, that the most secure computer is one of which you actually are, which is all the data connections has been snipped off, so that is completely offline. But then it's also completely useless if you go that way. But yes, the mechanisms actually exist to make an offline device secure. And remember, it's all about the detectability. You need to be able to detect tamper. I need to point out here that we're talking, security is a very wide concept. We're talking about authenticity here. We're not talking about secrecy per se. We really want to say that with our positive identity, and the ability, and positive identity means I can prove that Bill is Bill. None of you guys out there listening to us really knows whether I'm Bertus and Bill is Bill. You simply trust AIM and Mike that we're the real thing as an illustration. So you don't have positive identity on us. If you go into LinkedIn and you can go and check on us, and then you can get evidence that we are who we claim we are. But in this world we talk about, when we say the word security, we really mean that we can prove that there was no data tamper or there was no tamper, and we can prove the identity. And if I answer the question, yes, I can do it in offline, you need to read it in that context.
Okay, and we have a few more questions. This one basically is asking, we all know how smartphones will update themselves, give itself patches over time. Does it work the same for a smart house or a smart car?
Well, let's clarify something right here, is that smartphones do not update themselves unless you told it could do it. If it does, you've allowed it. You've checked the box that says yes, automatically update. So the control's still in your hand. Updates in general are an option. Now, in some of the auto world and some of the mechanisms that we've in place, we want it to be, when we say it needs to be updated, we don't want that check the box to make it optional. We have forced the situation at the beginning saying any update is mandatory. But in the electronics world, specifically in the cell phone world, updates are optional. But consider what an update is. Usually, and for those of us who have updated our computer and had it lock up, sometimes they're not beneficial, but usually updates are all beneficial. They fix a bug, they give you added capabilities, so they're desirable. But the human in the equation still has to make the determination, or the decider in the equation still has to make the decision, is this something that I want done? Because the benefits are something that I want. I would apply that logic to any update, regardless if it's a cell phone, computer, smart city. Now, smart cities are even worse because you're affecting more than one person. Generally, what we're talking about, what we've been talking about, is an effect on generally one person at a time. When you start getting into smart systems, when you get into distributed systems, now you're affecting lots of people, and you have to be very careful.
Well, I just want to refer back to that architecture slide. You would see there's an arrow that says policy. Now, we need to know that in the world of IoT, machine-to-machine communications, that there's no human at that machine who's going to say, update me. Now, there's a little arrow that says policy. So that device belongs to a domain authority. And that domain authority instructs through a policy the device when and how it should be updated. Now, as with mobile phones and computers, we have code signing, and the device, when it gets the update, should in fact detect whether that is a legitimate update. And again, we look back at the chain of accountability. That device will have to say, this update comes from where? Yes, that is the correct place. Has anybody tampered with this update? No, therefore I can use this update.
By the way, a hack occurred in the auto world as an update to the Bluetooth channel, and they took over the steering. So just to let you know that the auto industry is very aware that updates are needed, but updates are also a channel through which bad things can happen.
You plant Trojans. Yes.
Yes.
Let's go to the next question, because I see we have sort of a time limit.
Yeah. The next question is, if one device or piece of the chain is compromised, is the whole chain compromised?
In certain cases, yes. In other cases, no. I will use the example of parts maintenance. If you write, for instance, a digital signature of a maintenance, or if you sign every maintenance record and put it back on the device, you can have a history, a provable history of how that part was maintained on the part. So if you say, and you can prove every one of them, so you can actually see where there was a compromise in that chain. In other cases where you only store the last act, and that last act is compromised, then obviously the whole chain is compromised. And how we define that is based on our risk profile. Wolf?
Right, and this is why it's so critical that you have you've designed an effective chain of accountability, because Bertus's first example is the one that should be designed to. That I have a history. I can look up and down the whole chain, and I can see where things went sideways. So that I know up to this point I can trust it. That point right there I can't.
Well, Bill, that is where the problem starts. When I change my service providers, I change my operators. Is that that record in central systems often just simply disappears. I move from one operator to a new one, and the old operator takes his data with him. So that is why this is so important, that we we start to take cognizance and become aware of the fact that we need to plan for this and design for this chain of accountability.
Well said. Hope that answered your question.
Another question we received, basically if someone purchases a smart product or an IoT product, is there any way for that consumer to know how secure that device is? Like if you get a smart thermostat or a smart, garage door opener.
Well, do you want to answer that one?
Well, let me take a stab at it, because this points out the condition of the standards world right now. There is a lot of work that is going on currently in ISO on cybersecurity. Bertus and I both sit on a number of committees. A number of you on the webinar, I'm sure, do as well. So you know a bit of the state of the union, as it were, on the conditions of developing standards for security. Standards do exist. There is issues with some, probably with all. We're addressing those. The hoped for answer to this would be that, like you look for UL testing, CSA testing, you want to know, is this device going to help me? Is it going to be tested to some condition? Is it good for its purpose? You look for the standards it's been tested against. We're
that is where that chain of accountability comes in, Bill.
Yes.
We need to establish trusted test houses. The trusted test houses need to put a mark on the product that this device was tested to a certain level.
Yes.
And you, as the consumer, must have the ability to verify that mark to be genuine. You can see that chain again. Now, you don't want every time now to go to the website of the trust site or to the vendor that provided the product, and therefore we can see there was earlier question about offline, that there is a requirement to be able to offline verify. Now, this is not offline in the fact that you cannot go online. It's offline because it's convenient to verify. Again, I will use a very common example. When you look at a vehicle's license plate, and normally on the road, you would trust that that license plate is actually the real McCoy. But if you see that same vehicle drive off at the fuel station without paying, you say, well, wait a minute, maybe that's a false plate. What I'm trying to say is that we need to understand and be aware that we must be able to detect that genuineness, to detect the tamper. And again, that creates this trust chain, the chain of accountability. Now, putting it in the right perspective. If you purchase a device which actually has the trust seal of a test house on there, and it turns out that there was a problem, fairly quickly everybody will know that that test house put a bad product or did a bad test on it, as well as that vendor put a bad product out. So people are going to stay away from it. And that's the mechanism we're trying to get here, is actually to post that chain, us to detect that chain and verify it.
Yeah. Today, to directly answer the question, today, it's like the Wild Wild West. You're your own support structure, particularly. You buy it, it does the service it says it does, but as far as it being hackable or subornable, I would be a belt and suspenders kind of a guy and just say, assume it could be.
Yes.
We hope in years to come that will not be the case. But
okay,
today,
but that doesn't prevent you from using it. You need to actually still look at your risk profile.
Absolutely. Exactly. Well said. Use it, but look at your risk profile. Well said.
It's a bit of self-accountability. We're responsible for our own risk. I know modern world just blame the government for everything that goes wrong. Both Bill and I live on the farm, so when the bushfire comes through, we didn't do our proper preparation.
Yeah. Next question, Mike.
Yeah, and this will be our last question. Once again, appreciate everyone sending us these questions. And Bill, you kind of already said that the IoT right now in terms of security is a wild, wild west, but this is more of an opinion-based question of who should be responsible for securing the IoT? Should it be the manufacturer, the person that purchases it, a standards body? Who should be responsible?
What we preach is everyone.
Everybody.
That's what we're preaching here. We say we need to put the processes in place to make everybody accountable. We must be able to detect the bad relay device, the bad actuator. We must be able to understand and point a finger at who is doing the bad thing. And it has to end with a legal entity. Now, putting a computer in jail means nothing. Computers are pretty naive. You need to put a person in jail. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no accountability.
And everybody has to have a hand in that. Like, you know, to raise a child requires a community. You know, it takes many hands, makes light work. Well, this is exactly what the IoT requires. Everybody that's part of it has to be involved in its evolution, in its design, its creation, its chastisement. You know, everybody's got to be involved.
The essence of what we say with chains of accountability, which deals with the ability to detect that what is done before has been done properly, means that we identify the role players, the actors that is doing that thing or those things. And if you are aware, as a simple example, if I'm aware that Bill can detect that I'm doing a proper job or not, then I'm going to make sure, and he has recourse to me, against me, then I'm certainly going to make sure I do a proper job. You know, it's like, you know, if the other party can see when you're cheating, you're most likely not going to cheat. It is a human thing.
Yeah. And Reagan's had a really good point back. He says, you know, I trust, but I'm going to verify. And that's what we do. That's what we're doing right now. We're trusting that the IoT does what it says it does, and in the main it does. But we have to get to the point where we can verify, because at times it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Well, who's going to fix it? And everybody's sitting here looking at each other going, well, I don't know. Well, everybody has to get involved. We have to trust, but we have to verify. That's what a chain of accountability is.
Well, Bill, if we actually built in that mechanism, say for instance, the two of us work together and I have no recourse against you because I can't detect that you actually have done, you are the person that's doing the work. You're hidden behind some computers.
Right.
The moment I add that visibility and verifiability that you, the domain authority of those devices, you will realize that I now have recourse against you. So you're going to put the actions together to make sure that you put the security and the proper processes in place.
Yeah, exactly. And the analogy, there's a kind of a silly analogy, but it's effective. You know, locks keep honest people honest. Okay? Yeah. But also, if that lock got kicked in, and somebody entered my home and stole and did whatever, I have a chain of accountability. I had a lock on that door. It was kicked in. I go to my insurance agents. They prove that, yep, you got burgled, and we'll stand behind our policy and we'll replace what got lost. If there was no kicked-in lock, the insurance agency would go, you weren't burgled. I'll prove it. So this is what we're talking about. Well, truly do appreciate your participation, and thank you for your questions. Hopefully we've been helpful.
Yep, and thank you guys again for your insight and knowledge and for providing us with this presentation today.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, and thank you to our audience for their active participation. I hope that you all found this information to be valuable. Very soon I will be sending out a survey AIM would appreciate you filling out. This will help us with our future webinars and help guide our IoT committee in possible new work projects. Also, you can contact AIM at info@aimglobal.org if you'd like to learn more about AIM and our IoT committee. Thank you and have a great day.